welcome to All Things Odd. I'm Dr. Natalie Phillips.
And I'm Mary Kate.
All right. So I'm going to have Mary Kate talk real quick about our YouTube channel here.
Yeah. So if you've been watching our videos, you know that everything gets uploaded to our YouTube after we're done with the live show so that anyone can go back and access them from a later date. You can see our recent one with the research spotlight talking about hearing loss and death. Definitely go and check that one out. But we do these videos almost every week, and we usually group them into kind of like their little subcategories. So if you see there, you can kind of filter through from there. And honestly, it's a really cool way to share the videos for anyone who doesn't have Facebook, or if you want to just kind of show a friend. I'm honestly recommending these to our patients probably once a week. So I'm hoping they're going back and watching them.
Yeah. So if you kind of pick on some of this, like I'm just going to pick research spotlights, it will that too. But it will show you all the different research spotlights that we've done, or you've got other ones on the side here. So that's kind of cool. Yeah. So we just wanted to show that to you. All right. So today, Mary Kate came up with a really, really good topic for us today. And it is because we are talking about, we're going to celebrate Dairy Day. Now, we had thought about maybe getting some cheese and some milk today, but also we didn't want to kind of be eating and chomping or drinking milk during the broadcast here, just to kind of keep it nice and clean. But why are we celebrating? Why are we talking about cheese and milk? It's because National Milk Day was actually on January 11th. And then National Cheese Lovers Day is actually on January 20th. So that is in 2 days. So if you miss National Milk Day, you still have National Cheese Lovers Day coming up on the 20th. And so we had decided to do something fun and just kind of talk about how milk and cheese play into audiology. And so we're going to talk about milk first, and then we'll go to cheese, and then we've got some other different things too. So let's talk about milk first. So again, just a reminder about when National Milk Day and National Cheese Lovers Day is. But let's talk about milk consumption and your hearing. Okay, so first of all, milk is related to your bones, right? Like, I don't know how many of you have actually grown up and your parents were like, oh, drink a glass of milk, or what was the saying, where you drink milk and it like makes healthy teeth and bones or whatever it is, right? And so definitely milk does have the calcium that will build up your bones, right? Well, when we think about the ears and we think about what is related to the ear, it's related to your balance system, right? And if you think about, like, we actually do some balance testing here. And so for us, the biggest thing that we want to bring up in milk consumption and possibly thinking about trying to drink a little bit more milk is to kind of prevent the patients that are more prone to falls and maybe might have some balance issues as well. So we found a couple of different research articles that were, sort of helpful into reminding you how to, or to remind you to drink more milk, basically. So one study found, first of all, that there was no correlation, and one found a 33% decrease in fall risk when participants were getting enough milk daily. So it's funny because as we kind of sat down and looked at some of the different research, one research can say one thing, another research can say another thing. And so as Mary Kate talks more about the cheese, we're going to have that same issue as well when we talk about that. But it all kind of depends, right, in what you're reading and how your body needs different nutrients, right? Another study related to milk shows that there was a correlation between cow's milk protein and the allergy to cow's milk protein and otitis media. Otitis media is ear infections of the middle ear, so behind the eardrum. And when you think about ear infections behind the eardrum, or otitis media in the middle ear, the ear infection of the middle ear, for some people who develop an allergy to milk, some of the symptoms can include the inflammation of some of those membranes, and the inflammation of the nasal mucosa or in your sinus passages can also be associated with what we call eustachian tube dysfunction. And we've talked about eustachian tube dysfunction. Basically, it is the tube that goes from behind your eardrum in that middle ear space, and it comes down and kind of horizontal, and it's horizontal as the child, but it kind of starts to drop down a little bit more as you're growing up to be an adult. And so as you are changing altitude, so like if you are flying a plane and you're not able to equalize pressure from one side of your eardrum to the other side of your eardrum very well, you might have eustachian tube dysfunction. Now, for kids or babies even that travel, their eustachian tube is actually more horizontal. So that's why you hear, possibly, this is on my assumption, a lot of babies cry on the plane, because as you ascend or descend, they're not able to, like, we can't tell them, okay, hold your nose and blow out and like equalize that pressure. Like, there's no way. And so sometimes some of the things that are helpful that our mothers are told or parents are told is to feed the baby or have them drink milk or whatever it is as they're ascending and descending, because that swallowing type of thing that they're doing when they're drinking milk or eating something will help them equalize that pressure. And that's that eustachian tube dysfunction. So if you think about how does milk play into hearing and your hearing health, if you have an allergic reaction to cow's milk protein, then it's very possible that you could have this inflammation of the mucosa or that eustachian tube dysfunction, right? So the question is how much milk should we actually have per day? And Mary Kate found something that says that we should have at least 2 to 3 servings each day. And that could be in different dairy products, but 2 to 3 servings. Okay, so I'm going to have Mary Kate talk a little bit more about cheese consumption and your hearing.
Cheese is how I get my 2 to 3 servings of dairy a day. So glad to talk about this. So how does eating cheese play into audiology? Kind of the same thing with the calcium helping to increase bone strength. But another thing that we found is that it has been shown to increase brain health and help reduce cognitive decline. And so I feel like we're always talking about cognitive decline and brain health here and on the show. And so finding another thing that kind of helps contribute to that is really cool for us. And so that was cheese, and it also includes milk, just all kinds of dairy. It was interesting, kind of like what Dr. Phillips was saying before, as we go and we find these different research articles, we do get sometimes conflicting results. And so we found one that said increasing your dairy consumption may help reduce the risk of cognitive decline, Alzheimer's, and dementia. And I think in that it was a lot of elderly patients who weren't getting enough dairy. And then so they increased it to give them the right amount of dairy suggested each day. And then they saw those reductions. But then on the other hand, we found some articles that showed like no correlation, or almost like the opposite, that eating more cheese would hurt your brain. And so we were kind of like, how can that be happening? How can it be both of them? And then we were like, you know what? Like, some people just don't handle cheese very well. Like, maybe that's part of it. Like, maybe some of these participants were lactose intolerant and like didn't know it, or just like weren't really prepared with their body to be eating all that cheese. And so like if you eat too much, you get a stomach ache, you're like, oh my God, like I just don't feel well. You feel brain fog, all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily the cheese hurting your brain, or maybe you just need to like eat a little less cheese and kind of just take a little break from it. But I definitely thought it was interesting that we got lots of different results on that one.
Well, and we were laughing too, because we were discussing this yesterday and we were thinking, maybe because milk and cheese, when you're consuming it, like it relaxes you, or like, you know how people are like, have a glass of warm milk before you go to bed, things like that. So it's very possible that consumption might relate to that type of thing. We have a great question coming in from LinkedIn, somebody tuning in. So Tom Parkin, great to see you. This is why we do a live show. So I'm so glad that you posed the question, because we like to be able to have this interaction live. So your question says, does it matter whether it's cow milk, almond, or rice milk? And that's a great question. I'm just going to have a follow-up question for you if you're still tuning in, to try to figure out what the question is. So does it matter as far as, so I'll keep talking, but I'm going to kind of see if you can clarify. So is your question relating to the eustachian tube function that we had talked about, or is it relating to the milk and bones? So I'm going to think that I'm just going to go on the eustachian tube first of all. And you can clarify that if you want to add anything else as you're tuning in on LinkedIn. So the question is, does it matter whether it's cow milk, almond, or rice milk? I'm assuming that because the allergic reaction is to the cow's milk protein, that it is related, the nasal mucosa, the eustachian tube dysfunction, things that we had talked about, that allergic inflammation is probably from the cow's milk protein, is what I'm going to assume. If that's the question with the eustachian tube and what we had talked about with the otitis media or the middle ear infections as well. Now, it could be also a cause and effect. So, for example, if it were the allergic reaction and the inflammation to cow's milk protein, and you had that inflammation of the nasal mucosa, making that eustachian tube maybe a little bit thinner, or because of that inflammation, it could actually trap any type of mucus or any type of sinus drainage in that middle ear, which could be fluid behind the middle ear. Now, otitis media, we have a really simple test that we can test to see if the eardrums are moving back and forth. So whether or not it's infectious fluid or not, it just depends. So it could be just fluid and it wouldn't be infectious. Once it becomes infectious, and sometimes we can see by just looking into the ear canal behind the eardrum, if it is a weird opaque color, if we see bubbles, but the bubbles are clear, things like that. And so depending on whether or not it's an allergic reaction or not, I would assume that what that study had found is based on cow's milk protein and not necessarily the almond or the rice milk, because I think that the almond and the rice milk would then be a pretty good substitute, for an alternative instead of having that cow's milk. So hopefully that answered. Did you want to add anything?
I do think that if you were wondering if how much milk should I be drinking, with the strong bones and whatnot, I'm pretty sure that any kind of milk is gonna do well for you. It's about the calcium intake. They all have calcium. They all have different protein amounts as well, which is a good thing to get more protein. So I think in terms of what you're ingesting, any kind of milk that you choose is a good choice.
Yeah, that's good. So as you're watching, whatever platform you're on, we are now streaming through Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter live, as well as my LinkedIn page. So wherever you're coming from, we're happy to kind of field any questions that you have. Also know that we aren't physicians, we're audiologists. And so as we talk about your milk consumption, or we're going to get into the vitamin B12 too, just kind of take it with a grain of salt. But these are some of the things that we're finding from the research that we did pull up. Okay, so moving on. Oh, I think that he had one more. Oh, okay. So he said, great, thank you. You're welcome, Tom. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, so we're going to head over to, now we've talked about cheese consumption in your hearing. And again, if you're just joining us, we're talking about milk and cheese in your hearing because National Milk Day was on January 11th and National Cheese Lovers Day is on January 20th. So we thought it would be kind of fun to talk about dairy products in your hearing. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the vitamin B12 consumption that's found in dairy foods. And vitamin B12 is contained in eggs and dairy foods and some other foods as well, but we just kind of wanted to stick with the dairy as well. And we found that low consumption of B12 can affect your balance. So again, it goes back to that issue where that's something that we deal with our, balance patients. And studies have shown that a deficiency in some nutrients, so this is compiled nutrients, B12, folic acid, and some other nutrients, it can actually impair your hearing as much as 39%. So it's not just a B12 deficiency, but it's other nutrients, obviously. And then an increase in certain nutrients can also protect your hearing by 20%. And I thought that was kind of interesting, but it does make sense because I remember when, we see patients for noise exposure. And when I was working with a certain neurologist in California, he talked to me about after a person goes to a loud concert and you notice that temporary threshold shift because your hair cells are maybe bent or slightly damaged, that they sometimes prescribe vitamin E even, right? To really plump up those hair cells and really get that back faster. And so I think it's kind of interesting to dive deeper into maybe some of the nutrients that can affect your hearing or protect your hearing as well. So I think that's kind of cool too. So that's our vitamin B12 kind of dive.
And one more thing on the vitamins. I looked it up beforehand. You cannot ingest too much vitamin B in any of the forms. You can overdose on it. So if you take a bunch all at once, but if you go out and buy a multivitamin, a vitamin B multivitamin, it will usually have more than is needed for the recommended amount, but it doesn't hurt you at all to take the multivitamin. So add that to your new regimen.
Yeah. And speaking about that, we're going to kind of talk a little bit more about alternatives to common dairy products, because as we talked about it, how does milk and cheese play into audiology? We want to also go over, okay, if you're kind of now freaking out, like, oh, I have more than 2 to 3 servings, how can I reduce this, or whatever it is? Or maybe I've got an allergy. These are some alternatives to the common dairy products. And I'm going to have Mary Kate talk about that.
Yeah. And Tom actually kind of almost had a spoiler alert with this question, because some of our alternatives are almond milk, rice milk, coconut milk. Like Dr. Galloway in the office, she only drinks almond milk. And so I think it's interesting, especially now that milk alternatives have become more like popular and mainstream, to see like what people choose. I don't have a dairy issue, but like I can't drink milk fast enough. So that's why I buy almond milk. You can also try like the Fairlife products as well. Those are less dairy, but still give you all the calcium and nutrients. Instead of cream cheese, you can try alternatives like goat cheese. I love goat cheese.
I do too.
Or like part skim ricotta. I'm actually trying to make a homemade lasagna this weekend, so maybe I will get a part skim. And then instead of like processed cheese, you can do like organic cheese or grass-fed cheese. And just kind of making those different options to get the healthiest option, the most nutrients, and all the proteins.
Yeah. So, again, hopefully we have educated you a little bit. We've educated ourselves just by looking up some different things and research and just kind of diving deeper into that. And as you're watching us every week, just send us topics that you want us to cover. I know Mary Kate does a really good job in working on some of the topics and then doing the research to prep us for the show. But if you've got something that you want us to talk about and be part of the conversation, then please send us a direct message on any one of the platforms that we're streaming on: Facebook, YouTube, X, or Twitter. I should have called it X. And then also LinkedIn. So with that, we're going to end the show, and we'll be back next week. All right, we'll see you then.